All right, strap in, folks. This is probably going to make the left freak out, but I'm going to say it anyway. If I gave this monologue, though, the day after 9/11, nobody would have questioned it whatsoever. Now, mark my words, the same people who are just tore down American flags in New York City, on Veterans Day, no less, are going to try to call me bigoted for it. Oh, my, have we forgotten, folks. It's become somewhat of a cult that supports terrorists here in America. Like Hamas are terrorists. They're a radical spin-off of the Muslim Brotherhood, yet people are in favor of them openly in the streets. Their supporters are tearing down our cities and college campuses. They're chasing people into libraries that need to be barricaded in. This happens here in America, and no one seems to be doing anything about it, certainly not the White House. So let's flash back to the Cold War for just a second. If you espoused communist views, you were likely arrested. And for whatever flaws this movement had, it certainly had its merits. Communists were hell-bent on destroying America back then, and we took it very seriously. Not so much anymore. Now it's basically taught on college campuses. But the threat of radical Islam is far greater than communist ever was. So during the Cold War, there was an element of mutually assured destruction that held both sides, America and Russia, from launching an attack at each other. We don't have that in this conflict. And I really don't think the people making the decisions get that. I mean, maybe they're willfully ignorant or maybe just too stupid. But if we don't get our act together, this is going to hurt. And I'm talking like 9/11 kind of hurt. I spent 9 years facing this enemy from both an intelligence and combat side. I have followed terrorist cells and I've kicked in their doors and I have killed them. And until you have looked that kind of evil in the eye, you don't get to shout me down on this subject. So let me tell you what American and Western values are up against here that the White House refuses to acknowledge. Conservative estimates, some of them, even by our own State Department, estimate between 10 and 17% of the Muslim world to be considered radicalized. Now, what does radicalized mean? Well, oversimplified, it means they're willing to do harm to us, to Americans. Oh, Carl, 17%, that doesn't seem like a lot. Well, when you consider there's over 2 billion Muslims in the world, again, 83 to 90% perfectly fine coexisting with everybody else in the world, but that still leaves as many as 340 million Muslims who are seemingly willing to, or at least support violence against you and I and your families. You see my concerns about this becoming a little bit more socially acceptable here in America? If that battle would ever metastasize, that would be a one-on-one fight for every single man, woman, and child in this country. Folks, our standing military of around 2 million people would be completely overwhelmed. That will likely never happen, but it kind of illustrates the point I'm trying to make. Now, if you're part of one of these left-wing rags that writes me up on this show from time to time, before you try to fact-check me, consider this. According to a Pew Research poll of the support for Osama bin Laden in 2003, taken in 7 predominantly Muslim countries, Palestine, 72%, Indonesia, 59%, Pakistan, 46%, Jordan, 56%, Turkey, 15%, Lebanon, 19%. Now, that support subsided a bit, but average across the same respondents stayed well over 30% from the time that 9/11 happened until the time that we killed Osama bin Laden. Think about that. Over 30% averaged in those countries. Now, keep in mind, Pakistan is a nuclear power, by the way. They registered bin Laden's favorability at 46% in the direct aftermath of 9/11 for killing 3,000 Americans. You see my concern? It's like, why isn't the White House talking about this? Additionally, there are about 109 verses in the Quran that are affiliated with some level of violence or persecution for non-believers. Again, I'm not saying this to stir up hate. I'm saying this to make sure that you know what that side of the equation has and what they believe. It's a religion. These are fundamentalists in that 10 to 17%. These pro-Palestine protests, they align with the most radical parts of the Islamic world. Islam is not a unilateral religion of peace. Some of it is, but not the ones being featured on the streets of New York, certainly not on our college campuses, and they're getting bolder every day. They chased cops into Grand Central. And to say that, it's not racist. It's just true. Facts don't care about your feelings. Where's the 83 to 90% of the State Department's peaceful Muslim world rushing to condemn things like Hamas killing innocent civilians or any other number of terrorist attacks? 9/11, The Fort Hood shooter, the Chattanooga attacks on military recruiters, the San Bernardino shooting at a Christmas party, the Boston Marathon bomber. Any others? The list goes on. And there's some, but not 83 to 90% of the Muslim world. You see my concern? This is a real threat. This doesn't even account for the widespread support in the Muslim world's desire for Sharia law that is completely incompatible with constitutional freedoms that we enjoy here. Nearly all Muslims in Afghanistan, 99%, support Sharia law. And most in Iraq, 91%, Pakistan, 84%, support Sharia law as official law. That means oppressing women, penalties for homosexuality, lack of free speech, just to name a few, folks. And we have radical leftists who talk about microaggressions supporting this openly in our streets. Look, I am perfectly happy and willing to live peacefully with people of any faith, but not at the expense of my freedoms, my values, and my country's history. Folks, I did 2 deployments to the Middle East, okay? I have seen some really horrible things done in the name of this religion and the hatred it can harbor for some people in the West. I have seen firsthand parents using their own children to kill Americans. I personally had to take the life of one of them. It's not a joke. It's not a talking point. It happened. I have seen this violence, and you can deny it all you want, but it took some of my friends' lives. That is the face of the 10 to 17% of the Islamic world, folks. Again, equal to the population of the United States. And this is what a lot of our leaders don't understand. At some level, you have to take Islam at face value. Not all of it is a threat, but a big enough part of it is that we should be concerned about. And to dismiss real concerns is not only foolish, but it's ignorant. I don't understand the unwillingness to even acknowledge it either. That really baffles me. For instance, if a white guy shoots up a black establishment, has a history of racism, and leaves a note as such, it's clearly a hate crime and definitely should be prosecuted to its fullest extent as that. Every media outlet will and probably should publish that. But so should they do in everything else for the same vein. So why is it when things like Omar Mateen, the Pulse nightclub shooter, targeted gay people, killing dozens, posting this on his Facebook, quote, "The real Muslims will never accept the filthy ways of the West." Why is it that you get headlines like this from the Washington Post, where the FBI has found no evidence that Orlando shooter targeted Pulse nightclub because it was gay? He only said it. And the unwillingness to admit even the most obvious hate crime. Why? Because it was done by a Muslim? That's a choice. That's not even a race. Look, 2 of some of my closest friends here now in America are practicing Muslims. One was my interpreter in Iraq. He's actually been on this show. They would stand shoulder to shoulder with me and say the exact same thing I'm telling you now. They are in the 83 to 90% of the rest of the world's Muslims, and that's fine. But there seems to be an unwillingness, at least amongst the left, to define the 2 parts of Islam I'm talking about here and address them independently. The American left, and honestly most of Europe, who's learning a lot of this the hard way right now, for some reason think that not calling radical Islam what it is will somehow make it not exist. That's just not the case. Seeing these Hamas protests in our street makes me very concerned, folks. Forcing cops, as I said earlier, to barricade themselves in Grand Central Station, children in our educational institutions being chased, tearing down American flags. Folks, if I tore down a gay pride flag, I would be arrested on sight, and yet this is allowed to take place. And the left's support for this is absolutely crazy. Queers for Palestine? Are you kidding me? That's like cows for McDonald's. In Palestine, they will kill you for being gay. Here's the headlines if you don't believe me. Appeasement of terrorists will end in the destruction of our values and our country. Oh, and it won't spare you from their violence if you try to get on board with this and support them in your protests. When someone chants death to America, I believe them. Whether it's a whole country, an individual person, whether it's 5,000 miles away or right here on a college campus in New York, spray painted on the ground or whatever else. I believe them. You should too. What do all these people with their head in the sand think is coming? The second these fundamentalists get a chance to strike, they will. And they're not going to care about your virtue signaling. Israel was just in their backyard, so it was easier for them to mount an attack because they're over there. Folks, we have unregulated mass migration at the southern border, and no idea who has come here in the last 3 years. It took just 19 terrorists, who we knew were here, to carry out 9/11. You feel secure?